This is All About Home Construction. And here's your hosts, Terry Cannell-Beck and Randy Blake.
That's right. Good morning, Randy.
Morning, Terry.
How are you, man?
Everybody out there?
What's going on?
Well, this is a first for us.
Maybe a little bit.
Well, for being in Calabash, North Carolina.
That's fair. That's fair.
Could have in the rock and roll kitchen at the VFW.
I'm just saying, you decided to take off and go fishing this weekend. It's going to be cold up here. A little bit of snow in the mountains, and Randy gets scared and runs off to the beach.
No, and I'm not going fishing either.
All right, that's fair. So no, but thanks for calling in. Appreciate it, and thanks for all of our listeners out there and All About Home Construction. And we appreciate all the good people just being understanding. I decided that I needed the day off last week because why not, right? Because when 4 kids in the house end up with the COVID thing going around, I decided I might as well take it too, right? Why not let the kids suffer alone? So
that's right.
I appreciate all of our listeners out there being patient with us and understanding.
Isn't that truly amazing? It's making its rounds again.
It's been kind of crazy, and there's going around, like, I just know with having kids and stuff, and it seems like the flu thing is going around with some people. There's some kind of weird stomach virus going around the high country, and there's also COVID going around the high country. So take your pick. But maybe this cold weather we're going to get the next 24 hours will take care of some of that.
Well, I'll be back tomorrow. So.
Well, good luck, because it's going to be cold tomorrow, and then we may see some snow up on coming into Martin Luther King on Monday. We could see some snow, but the biggest thing this weekend is going to be the wind and the temperatures. So that's
it's supposed to be later. Later in the week, supposed to be down to 4 degrees.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And actually, today, the temperature is going to drop, and we've actually seen our high already for the day. And we're gonna drop down temperatures today, and then of course that's not counting the windshield too. I mean, we're going to see some pretty nasty gusts this weekend. We could see like 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts throughout the weekend. But yeah, I mean, as we look ahead, like, the highs are I don't even know, like, maybe Monday it'll get just above freezing, but basically it's going to be at or below freezing pretty much for the whole week. I think Thursday is like 34 degrees, but I mean, I don't put a lot of projection when it gets that far out because it changes so much. But yeah, I mean, it's highs on Wednesdays in the 20s. So
yeah, well, we got to get it down below zero if we're going to kill the bugs.
Well, that's we think about that a lot, right? And that'll in just a little bit get back, sort of relates to some of our topic today. But you're right, and when the bugs, especially out in the forest and stuff, like, they got to get back into those. They dig into into the trees, and I'm thinking like powder post beetles and things like that, like. They're pretty deep into it, and we all know that the wood, our value of wood is not the worst. I mean, there's better products, but I mean, wood is somewhat insulating, and so when you're a little bitty bug and you get in the middle of it, it protects you.
Yeah, Travis Small a couple weeks ago posted the ash borer worm underneath the bark. And I wonder if that cold weather would kill that, because the hemlocks
right
died because of a fungus, and then you've got the ash. And I always knew about the red oak borer worm, and I just wonder if the cold weather would kill them, because they're just right underneath the bark in the soft layer, and they eat that soft layer, and that's what kills the tree.
Right.
They can't supply the nutrients up the trunk.
Yeah, that's a cool science about trees, and the center of the trunk is important. I mean, it holds everything together. The trunk, like the whole system of a tree is important, but the nutrients flow on the outer layer, if you will, not the bark, but like the outer side of the trunk itself. And because we can see that, like, you can, back in the day when everyone was using firewood for heat, you would choke off your trees and leave them standing, so you could cut them down and they'd be dry or drier, at least in the winter. And that's what you do. You just cut a ring around it. When you're cutting a few inches into the bark, or into the tree on the bark and cutting into it, and it chokes the tree because the nutrients can't go up through it. So,
yeah, and that way they get their dry firewood.
Yep. So I mean, that. So yeah, like that's what the bugs do, though. They're kind of doing the same thing, and that's what kills so many of those trees, and especially the hardwoods, like you said. And then. Well, and I'm gonna save the hemlock thing for later because that's gonna relate more to what we're gonna jump into in the show. But yeah, it's that's the same thing. Like, it's just pulling those nutrients from the tree.
Well, my brother lives in northern Idaho, and which is cold out there right now. And but they have nothing to burn out there but pine.
Right.
How everybody here won't burn any green pine or anything because of the soot.
Right.
And he does exactly what you said. In the spring, he'll find the trees that he wants to cut down for firewood, and he'll take his chainsaw and cut a circle all the way around it.
Yep.
So that way, comes August, September, he's ready to knock that tree down because it's already dried up.
Right. Yep.
And but he also used the water stove too, so he ain't like us. He don't have to cut wood in 18-inch or 2-foot lengths because he can put 4-foot logs in his.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
So he loads it one time for 3 to 4 days.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I saw one of those videos on social media, Facebook or something like that, where and I wish I would have saved this because afterwards I couldn't find it again. Someone had one of those outdoor stoves, and this was a huge stove. Like, this is one of the larger ones, and the top opens up, like the roof, if you will, opens up. And again, it's one of those outside units, so the roof opens up of the unit, and the guy was putting like 6-foot logs in with his tractor, just dropping them in with the forks. And I was like, man, that's the way to go. You fill it up, and it's like it lasts a week.
I've seen that one too. My brother, it's pretty wild. Because his water stove's probably 100 foot from the house.
Yep.
And the first stop is it goes into his hot water heater. The next stop is it goes into his furnace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it makes a circle and it goes back out into his hot tub.
Yep.
It warms his hot tub, and then it goes back to the wood stove. And he had a guy that he worked with set up all the thermostats at each station so he can actually control the temperature.
Right.
So he's not popping off and stuff.
I think it's great. I mean, I've got some family members growing up who had similar water stoves, and I'm like you. I've always thought, like, especially if you've got like a greenhouse or like a hot tub or even a swimming pool, right, that you want to heat up a little bit, like that's to me, that's just a great way to do it. And, a lot of people too, Randy, especially like your brother's instance where he's heating his hot water to it, right? Even in the summer, you need hot water. And some people can build a fire in the summer, a small fire, and it heats up enough water. And if you've got a good tank that holds it, you can heat up your water, maybe once, twice a week, and a good tank will hold it. But even an electric tank, right, you're preheating the water, and so it's going to cut back even if you had an electric as a backup. And so so in the summertime you just build a small fire, and it doesn't heat the house, but it heats the water still. And I don't know, it's really cool. It's fascinating. And I like the fact too, an ideal system for me would be to put the shed that you got next to it for the wood, you put a nice little solar panel up there, and then you're heating your water too.
He's even gone as far now with it that his greenhouse floor.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a little older now. He don't have a hot tub now, but now it heats the concrete slab underneath his greenhouse.
Yeah,
he can actually grow stuff in the wintertime.
Exactly, and I know, I know again, just growing up and around some agriculture, I know of some farms, and I say, like greenhouse farms, nurseries, I guess is the correct word for that, right? But I know some nurseries that use that. I mean, that's how they grow, the plants, and that's how you get these pretty flowers in by Mother's Day, right? And then so they heat it with wood, and it's kind of cool because that way, the problem with wood heat in general, like if we're talking about a stove, is the dryness. It pulls a lot of moisture out of the air, which is bad for plants. But by doing it like we're talking about, where you're cycling that hot water, so you're using the wood to heat up water that's going through tubes. I mean, it's like radiant heat essentially.
They've not had the winters out there like, the last 10 years like they used to.
Right.
They're getting the winter now like they used to. I know we were out there in June one time, and golly, I guess in the mid-90s, and they still had a snowdrift on one mountain that was 27 foot deep. So.
Wow.
So he's up there in the boonies.
Sure. Well, I saw something. I don't know if it was a news article or something, but and I didn't catch exactly where it was in Canada. But this past week, and somewhere in Canada, it showed a house, and it's sort of like an A-framed house, and the guy is opening the door opening a little window rather. On the top level, and he goes down, and he's like 3 levels deep, but he's just walking on the snow, opening a little window and crawling in, the third floor.
Yeah.
So I mean that's crazy snow pile.
Well, they're doing that now in the Sierra Madres in California, going in on the balconies.
Yep. So
through the front doors. So. Yeah,
and that's that's actually that'll get into our topic here. We'll get into it in just a moment, but that's when you have snow like that, because it melts so slow, typically it's going to trickle in, and that's a lot of water, but it's also a lot of pressure up against those structures. That's would be my concern, I guess, if I had a house. It's like, for one, the water, because water's going to get in your house, and if it doesn't actually go in the door, if you clear it out and it's still not coming in the actual door, it's seeping through and into the walls and stuff, and it's just a lot of moisture.
Yep, and well, you have to build accordingly, and those old people know how to build accordingly.
Right.
They still a lot of Canada, a lot of northern states and stuff. They have to be able to get the snow off the roof to keep their houses from caving in. Yeah. People don't. We've never had to do that in the mountains here.
Yeah.
And which, I mean, I guess we're pretty fortunate with our lumber. The deflection in it can withstand the snow load.
Yeah.
But you'd probably take modern technology's made it so it's hard for roofs to cave in. So.
Yeah, I mean that's the advantage of the engineering, right? It doesn't collapse the whole thing, but still, that's anytime you have pressure, right? I mean, the weight is bad when you have water, and then you add weight over time. That's bad too. But anyway, that'll actually
water causes termites.
Well, that's it, right? And it causes a lot of issues. And I tell you what, we're going to actually jump into that in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and take our first break before we do. And then don't forget, you can listen to the podcast All About Home Construction here on WATA as well. And go check that out, All About Home Construction, wherever you listen to podcasts, or right here live on Saturday mornings. Randy, we'll take a break. We'll be right back, all right?
All right, bye.
That's right. All about home construction here on WATA. And again, thanks to all of our listeners out there. Don't forget about the podcast as well. Share it with some friends. Talk to some people. We always got the Facebook page, Randy. Of course, people can ask questions, and we get quite a few on there, from time to time, and people talking to us all the time. So if you got questions and comments, by all means, reach out to us. And actually, speaking of the Facebook page, Randy, when we jump into our topic here now, I actually put the pictures that we're going to be talking about up on the Facebook page. So, little preview there if you want to jump online right now. But speaking with Randy, who's decided to take. Well, I'm not going to pick on you, but let's just say you take a fishing trip down to the beach because it's cold, but you're just taking care of some work, Actually, it looks like you got a little bit of work going on yourself now, thanks to the trip, huh?
Well,
yeah.
I'm down here inspecting my mother's house, and because in that straight line wind that happened in that rain a couple of weeks ago, we had a top out of southern yellow pine, probably about between 12, 14 inches thick, flew about 70 foot and hit the top of my mom's house.
Ugh.
And I sent Terry the pictures of it.
Yeah, it looks pretty rough, dude.
Since we've been in the metal business, and I know you've all heard me talk about inferior metals, okay? And a lot when you get a good price on metal, it's not necessarily American products. It could be from China, it could be from Mexico, because those are the two countries now making a lot of substrate.
Right.
This particular metal that's on my mom's house was manufactured by Fabrel, and Fabrel is actually the company that patented the agricultural panel that you see on everybody's houses today. Mm-hmm. And they make the metal was patented in 1956, so the patent's as old as I am.
Right.
But the thing that always stuck with me was the tensile strength of the panels. Okay. And the lower the tensile strength, you really don't notice it, but the metal is thicker, it's more pliable, and it will have a tendency to come and go with dents and stuff, okay? Like sometimes you'll get hail hit your roof and you'll get a dent, but eventually, because of the expansion and contraction of the sun, the dent will work its way out.
Right.
Well, in this case, this is the first time that we've had a tree go through the house. And it didn't come through the main house, but it came through the porch roof. So, but in that one picture I sent you, you can see the facial board that's, about 5 foot from the ridge where it just totally tore the facial off. And
that's rough looking. And, and again, like I said, it's not just let's clean it off and patch the roof, right? Like there's some structural stuff that you're going to have to go back and fix up and clean up. So that's it. Looks like quite the project.
Well, it's not, because it didn't really break the rafters, but it cracked the rafters.
Okay. So
we'll be able to sister on.
That's good.
And we've got to take the measurements and stuff on it.
Sure.
To see how much we got to replace. But yeah, there's probably about 8-10 holes in it where the limbs went through it.
Yep. Wow.
But like I said, it absorbed a lot of the pressure.
Yeah.
From it.
So it could have been worse if it was a shingle.
Correct.
Roof.
And it could have. With shingles, the whole every limb that hit the roof would have went through.
Right.
And we did a job, around 2002, 2003 in Blowing Rock, where a top out of a white pine had came out.
Yeah.
And it was closer to the house than this yellow pine that hit my mom's house, because the top out of this tree was probably 60, 70 feet from the house.
Wow.
Flew across and hit her house. Well, the one in Blowing Rock, the tree just fell out, and it happened twice on that house.
Yep.
And it happened, and the guys, luckily it was a summer home, not a winter home. and it hit in the children's bedroom.
Right.
And we had the second time it happened, one of the white pine limbs, about a 3-inch limb, come all the way through the roof, through the drywall, and right through the center of where one of his kids would have been sleeping if they'd have been home.
See, and you hear about those stories, and you see those crazy pictures, of the limbs sticking in and poking the couches and stuff. I mean, it's kind of scary stuff, really. You think about being in a house, you're safe and sound, but and we don't experience the tornadoes, but that's the same effect, right? When the trees are being blown out, when the tree's being shot across the air in a twister, right? It's the same sort of thing. And then I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is when you see it like that, you realize just how dangerous it can be sometimes. So, yeah,
that goes to show you that the tensile strength of the panel is important too.
Yeah.
And one thing I mean by that is you can take an 80,000-pound tensile strength trim, and if it doesn't fit good, you can put it in a break and you can straighten it, or you can put a new bend in it. Where the 120,000-pound tensile strength metal, if you try to stretch it or close it, it will run. It will split.
Right.
And we had to replace a roof one time, and a metal roof. And my lead man, Greg, he reached down and he said, "Watch this." And he grabbed the panel and he tore it all the way across.
Oh, wow.
Our hands. So that's the reason I do not like imported metal.
I get it.
And, with all these natural disasters and stuff that comes, that's what I'm looking for. We've talked about it on the show before about fasteners and stuff.
Yep.
Just like these tornadoes, was it Charlotte or down around Charlotte that hit this last week?
Yeah.
And I was looking at that mobile home, a double wide, and when double wides and modulars and stuff are built, the plywood is all foam to the rafters or the walls or the floor system. Okay.
Right.
Well, that one house, they showed all the sheeting off of it. I didn't see any foam on it, so somebody dropped the ball on that job. That's what allowed that plywood to come off.
Right.
And that stuff is stapled down. It's not nailed down.
Sure.
Staples has a lot more holding power than nails do. A lot of people don't believe that, but as long as the staple's installed correctly, it'll hold a lot more.
Right. Well, cool. Well, I'm going to get into those pictures I just put on Facebook. So all about home construction on Facebook. You can look into that. And another type of damage that we see so often, not just related to storms and trees, but definitely related to houses and wood, is we run into this quite a bit. And one of the I would argue, and you correct me, but probably in terms of like repairs, probably the most leading cause, if not one of the most leading causes of damage in any house. And when you're talking about from a minor level to a major level, right? And that is wood rot.
Yes. And I know we talked about warranty on treated lumber.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before the show, I was, reading an article about the arsenic. Okay, and they took the arsenic out of treated lumber in 2003. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't exactly understand why just taking arsenic out causes the treated lumber to start rotting more than it did before. Okay, I'm not a chemist, so I couldn't tell you there. And
I got some thoughts on that, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the EPA had the arsenic took out of the lumber because they estimated 1 out of 1 million child would have problems with the arsenic, and so that's about like winning the lottery. And but they've also, they have fought it, trying to create it better,
right?
And they failed. We've talked about other shows where treated lumber in 8 years has happened to be replaced.
Right.
Okay. So we're down on this job in Caldwell County, and generally as a rule of thumb, if your deck's rotting, your floor joists will be fine. Okay.
Right.
Here we're finding a house that's 10 years old, and the floor joists are rotted.
That's wild, and that's the pictures we put up. And now, when we say rot, right, like there's a couple different things when we think about rot. I mean, there's essentially like in wood, there's 3 different types of rot, and that's your white rot, your brown rot, and your soft rot. And we'll sort of jump into some of those, but when you think of like a tree in the middle of the woods that fell down and you pick it up and it falls apart in your hands, the spongy stuff falls apart. That's like that's going to be more like your soft rot, and typically, ideally we don't see that in house because you're using finished lumber that's ideally protected from moisture, right?
Correct, and it's keel dried. So when it comes to you, the reason for keel dry is to kill the bugs if there's any bugs in the lumber.
Yep. Well, yes, you're right. That's half of it. I think the other half too is it makes it more stable, right? Because you're putting in wood will dry out on its own, and so if you don't keel dry, if you air dry wood, it takes longer to. And so it makes it more stable. So I would argue that the kiln does 2 things, and that's the bugs and make it more stable.
It does, and it helps out a bunch.
Yeah.
I remember building with green lumber in the 80s and 90s, and we had to pearl line the walls 3 times to keep them from twisting.
Mm-hmm.
Green studs stuff.
Right.
I'll tell you one thing, you make a stout house just like coming out of the 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah, well,
green lumber.
There's a reason why 100-year-old, 200-year-old houses exist, right?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go back to the rot. So again, the soft rot is again like what we think of when we think of again just that it crumbles up in your hands. You poke it with something and poke it with a screwdriver and it goes all the way through. Sometimes with your finger, right? And that's what you ran into in this house that you're working on, and it's. I mean, again, you see like rot, but so many times on the structural side of rot, it's not that like. I mean, that's just a lot of rot. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is like that's broken down so much.
Well, it is, and I told Terry this is the first for me on this house here, because we looked at it probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And this is the Great Wall on this house. And it holds, what a Great Wall does. Cathedral ceiling. It's got French doors, big glass on each side, glass above it. So you've got a sizable load on it. Mm-hmm. Well, you do have a sizable load, but your rafters, A-frame pitch actually helps carry a lot of that load, see?
Right.
And, but between the time period of year and a half, 2 years ago up until a couple of weeks ago when we got to looking at it, this was some of the oddest construction I'd ever seen. And what they did was they put the mud seal down, but they also put the girder down. The girders in the house are made out of 2x12s.
Right.
They put a ledger strip underneath the 2x12 to hold the 2x10 floor joist. And so when they used 2x10s for the band outside, they were a half-inch short, okay? So what they used to shim the band with was OSB,
right,
7/16.
Right.
So they're already a 1/16 of an inch short on height-wise. But most people don't, most people have been in the business a long time, understands that even plywood will compress.
Yep.
Okay? It's not made to hold structural loads on it. And what they should have done was continued the mud seal all the way around standard method and add another floor joist to the girder, made it a triple instead of a double. That way, it had all been the same height.
Right.
Right. But what these yahoos did, and I have no idea how this house ever passed inspection, is they used 6 mil plastic for the house band flashing.
Plastic. Nah, I mean, yeah, wow. I mean, that would, you would almost be better off not having any, right?
Well, I don't know about that, but the thing about it is they didn't take into consideration what plastic does.
Right.
And plastic sweats. You know, and that's the reason I sent Terry the pictures, because unlike a year and a half, 2 years ago, you know, we knew that the band was rotted, but there was pieces of the band falling out.
Right.
When we went back a couple weeks ago. And the only thing really holding this great wall up was the treated band on the outside.
So wild. And you're not exaggerating. Like, you can see through this piece of wood. I mean, there's holes in this piece of wood. It's just wild. It's wild.
And so, you know, us as a contractor, me as a contractor, you know, had to figure out how to fix it.
Yep.
Keep the wall from coming down.
Yep.
You know, which you didn't have a lot of space there to get a 20-ton in. What we could have done was cut holes in it and set cribbing up on the outside and take a jack to hold it.
Yep.
So instead of what we did is which it wasn't hard. We figured we'd have to take a vibrator to cut the OSB up, and Frank said, no, he just took a pocket knife and cut it. It was a damn rotten.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then we made bridging.
Yep.
That fit on the wall, so it set on the mud seal and helped the great wall up so they could take the band out and the wall not come down.
That's wild.
So we actually came out pretty good without doing a lot of jacking on the house.
Nice. Well, Randy, let's take another break. We'll come right back right after this. And I'm going to get to it also, Randy, like, what is wood rot? I mean, we know what it is, but let's really get into it. Thanks for listening to us. That's right. All about home construction here on WATA. And again, thanks to all of our listeners out there. And Randy's here from Calabash, North Carolina. South Carolina. So whatever it is. Whatever Carolina he's in.
South Carolina. Capital of the world.
Yeah, that's what I meant. All right. Before we get into the next little segment here, I've got a little audio treat for you, Randy. I don't know if you can hear this the best. It sounds like little white noise. No, that's not your speakers messing up. You know what that was, Randy? That's the bioelectrical field recording of FUNgus, which is Serpula lacrimans. And you know what that is?
Now, is that you talking about in the forest now?
Well, it can be in the forest, but it's also the number one fungus that when we think of rot, especially dry rot, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's the number one type of fungus that is dry rot. So there you go. That's what it sounds like when your house is being eat up by what we call dry rot.
Also that fungus you talk about
mm-hmm.
is the largest living organism in the world, and it is all. When you walk into a forest,
yep,
it covers everything underneath the leaves. That living fungus is all together.
Well,
that's the reason stuff don't stay long on the ground.
Right. Well, so that's it. And so I was thinking about this earlier when you're sharing the pictures and stuff, and we're talking about the rot. Like, we all know what wood rot is. I mean, we live. First of all, we live in the high country, and we see the trees fall down. We know what rot is. That's a pretty common thing. I mean, you could talk to everyone on the street, and I would say most people can explain what wood rot is. But I got to think about it like, really, what is wood rot? And so I got to look into it. It's really the wood decay itself is because of fungus. And the number one, like wood decay, what we call is Xylophagus fungus, and it just if you think about it, it's a fungus that's eating wood, and that's what the result is: rotted wood. And so I don't know. It just made me think about it. Like I guess when you look at it that way, like it's a living thing, and now there's people probably freaking out because, like I just said, like their walls are living. There's fungus in everything. There's fungus in the air. Like you're breathing fungus right now, and yeast is a type of fungus. And it can make your sauerkraut, it can make your beer, but you're breathing it in, and you don't even know it. And
make your bread.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Like it's those spores. I mean that's a fungus, but when you think about it that way, to me anyway, like it starts to make sense of how do you keep things from rotting, and we talk so much about the moisture, but really that's what it is. What does living things need? And if you think about it that way, right?
How many people have picked up a board off the ground and see that white spider web growing on the back? Not really a spider web, but that's the mold growing on the back of that bowl.
Exactly. And when you look at rot, it can be classified wood decay fungi, if you will, if you want to go with that Xylophagus word. That's my big fancy word for the day, by the way. Xylophagus. There's three types. You got the brown rot, you got the white rot, you got the soft rot. Now, we call the brown rot, you're not very familiar with that name because we call it dry rot. It's not really dry. It's just a different type of fungus that's eating the wood up, and and it lives in a little bit different conditions, which is what we call dry rot. Soft rot, again, is like we talked about. Like you pick it up and it's gonna, a piece of wood up and it falls apart in your hand when you squeeze it. Like that's the soft rot. And then the white rots, like you said. When you pick, when you see that that growing, looks like that, you can. I mean, it looks like a fungus, right? You see the fungus kind of growing in the woods, and you see that in the middle of the woods on trees all the time. And if you've ever seen a fallen tree that's been down for a while, and you go over and you touch it, and the bark falls off, a lot of times you see that white rot, underneath the bark of a decaying tree.
Well, makes you wonder. We're paying for treated lumber, and treated lumber's rotting in 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, golly.
And so that's what that, and again, this is just my theory. And part of what the arsenic probably did, and what we want in treated lumber is insects is one thing, because insects, what do? They open up the cells of the wood so it gets more exposure from rot. And now, yes, they're eating things up too, and taking the wood away, so to speak. But treated wood, and when it comes to not rotting, that's the thing. It's treated so that the fungus cannot live in it. Right? It doesn't waterproof wood. It makes it conditions less than ideal for fungus to grow.
I've always took my post all the way down to the top to my pad. Okay. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of houses where they come up out of the ground and they put sonotubes on and they put the post on top of it.
Right.
Well, the only reason I always got away from that is because if you don't put an adequate footer underneath that pier, now you have a pivot point with your post.
Right.
Okay. And so now this puts a whole new light on everything, because now if your posts are rotting too, just like your floor joists are rotting, you're going to have to come out of the ground to add your post, right, to the top of a pier.
Yep.
To keep it from rotting. Code addressed it years ago where your post was 1 inch off your concrete pad, so at least the water would drain away from it to keep it from having any trouble.
Right.
A regular homeowner cannot get the treated lumber, the 6.1 or 1.6 that a contractor can. But when you go to some of these big box stores, there's none of it that's treated that good. You have to specifically order that product. And that product still has arsenic in it, and and there's some of it that's been out there since the 40s that still hadn't rotted.
Sure.
Give you a good indication. Your telephone poles, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Telephone poles don't rot.
Right.
They do dry rot, but, they could be 30, 40 years down the road.
Yep. But again, when we think about it, right, it's that to me, it just makes a lot more sense when we think about it as rot as sort of that living organism, the fungus itself, because especially when it comes to construction of houses, right? Like, let's take your example that we just talked about of, earlier with the pictures online, and that is, you've got something now, you got plastic that is holding in the moisture. And what do living things need? They need heat, they need food, they need water, right? There's some other things, but that's the essentials, and that's what you see with plastic, right? Plastic is going to hold somewhat of heat in. It doesn't have an R value, but it reflects and it pushes the heat back, so to speak. I mean, you've talked about going camping and you wrap a plastic around you in a sleeping bag, right? It's holding that heat in, it's reflecting it back, and so it's keeping it moist because it can't dry out, and it's keeping it warmer. And we see mold. Ideally, fungus will grow 50 to 90 degrees. So that's why you see it a lot in the springtime, summertime. And so that's why you see it in basements, right? That's why when you think of like, where are the big places that have wood rot, and it's always near water, right? Your soffits, or your at the bottoms of any kind of post near the ground.
Well, see, we talked about earlier about the homeowner having a water problem underneath the house, okay? So one thing that caused the water problem was the contractor didn't put a French drain around the house.
Right.
Okay? All right, even with the French drain, when you got extremes, and what I mean by extremes is the lower part of the house, the wall's 6 foot tall.
Right.
The back side of the house the crawl space is 2 foot high. Okay, so his driveway's there. Yeah. So you're always going to get so much water that's going to come underneath the footer up above in the driveway that comes down. So the homeowner put him a dehumidifier in. Well, the dehumidifier is sucking out the back of the house. You know, he's catching that moisture coming in, but you know, dehumidifiers create heat. Okay, yeah. when they're absorbing water, taking water out of the air. Well, in the direction of this dehumidifier was going against the house band. So see, this house band was continuously sweating because of the cooler outside temperature to the warmer temperature in the crawl space.
And that's where I'm thinking. Like when we think, I don't know. To me, anyway, it's just the light bulb moment when you think of like rot being living, and especially when we talked about the prevent. And like you said, it's keeping the heat in, and it's keeping, it's causing it to sweat, condensate, so it's keeping it moist, which is the two of the big things that fungus needs to live.
And me as a contractor, they tell us that we cannot build a house too tight.
Right.
Okay? But it seems like we are building houses tight, with the high-performance windows, high-performance insulation and stuff. So if you don't add what you need, and what I mean by that is if you don't put your Tyvek on the house to make sure that moisture that gets condensation behind the siding is not leached out, now you're with a tighter house, you're creating a moisture level against your plywood.
Yep.
And that was the whole idea of house wrap, was to keep moisture from coming inside the house.
Right. Well, but Tyvek, house wrap, whatever, is not the same as plastic, though. It looks very similar, but it's not the same thing.
It will not condensate. Yeah. It's made to move the water away from the house.
Exactly.
Now, we have seen people put Tyvek on backwards.
Yep.
So when you put it on backwards,
does the opposite.
It will turn the water into your house.
Well, there you go. Well, Randy, we got to wrap things up here, and then all about home construction. Again, don't forget to share the podcast with your friends. Go back and listen to it, and I don't know. I think there's a lot more science stuff we can get into, but that'll have to wait for another day. Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
Well, Randy, thanks again, and all of our listeners out there, thank you. Randy, we'll see you next time. Take it easy.
Bye.